Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So last night I looked outside the window and I saw the Jedi Temple burning. Naturally, I got into my speeder, went over there to check out what was going on, and I saw a bunch of bodies lying around, which I proceeded to loot, which is how I got this really kick-ass Jedi bathrobe. Now I figured it out why the Jedi wore these garments. It's really the only loophole that allows you to go into public without wearing any pants and then still be socially acceptable. But that is not what we're going to be talking about. Today we're going to be looking at one of the most recent Darth Vader comics. Now guys, if you're a big fan of Darth Vader, I do recommend you check out this comic series. It is canon, so that means everything in it is official, and it basically follows what happens to Darth Vader after the Clone Wars. Anyway, in the most recent episode, we finally figure out who Anakin's father is. Now, for those of you who haven't read this comic, we'll explain exactly what has happened and what this new revelation means for the future of Star Wars. There once was a young boy named Momin, whose sole pursuit in life was art. The problem was that his art was of the sick, torturing cat variety, and that was heavily frowned upon by polite society. Now, as Momin grew older, his artwork grew more shocking and more bold and grotesque. The young man was then finally thrown into prison. Now, he'd be rescued by a Sith lady named Shmi, who would teach him in the ways of the Force as an apprentice. Momin couldn't accept being second to another and destroyed Shmi. Now, with his new abilities and Shmi's immense resources, he continued his pursuit of art. Even by Sith standards, Momin was a really weird individual. He didn't really care so much about wealth or power like other Sith Lords. Instead, his whole focus in life was to create a piece of art that would immortalize him in the eyes of the dark side of the Force. The result was a super weapon that could destroy cities, which is kind of tame for Star Wars standards. But Momin didn't just want to kill an entire city of people, he wanted to capture the populace's fear in the moment before their demise. He saw pure fear as the ultimate expression of the dark side of the Force. Momin was able to pour his Force energy into his weapon in order to freeze time so that he can really relish all of the population's fear. But before he was able to complete his ritual, the Jedi came aboard a ship and stopped him. Momin, already overstretched in the Force, physically disintegrated, and his essence was fused into the mask that he was wearing. Now, that mask possessed by Momin was hidden in the Jedi archives for many years until after Order 66, when Lord Sidious found it. Now, Momin, like we said, was a very odd individual, so his fellow Sith Lords viewed him as kind of a heretic. Momin was also too absorbed in his own pursuits to actually have an apprentice. This means his unique understanding of the Force disappeared with him into the vault. Now, a few years after Order 66, Darth Vader was finally comfortable in his suit of armor and had killed more than his fair share of surviving Jedi. Palpatine rewarded Vader with a planet of his choosing. The Dark Lord decided on Mustafar, the site of his greatest failure. Palpatine wanted Vader to have his own planet so he could continue his studies in the dark side of the Force. Palpatine also gifted Vader Momin's mask, hoping that the ancient Sith Lord could further guide him in the right direction. Shortly after becoming Darth Vader, Anakin had traveled to Mustafar to a nexus of dark side Force power that he found within a cave. It was here that Anakin bled his first Kyber crystal, which was formed into his first red lightsaber. Vader's goal was now to build a fortress on top of the nexus so he could channel its power. The Mask of Momin saw an opportunity arise and convinced Vader that he was capable of creating a structure that focused the energy in the right way. While Vader's Imperial architects were amongst the best in the galaxy, they weren't really Sith Lords, and they probably didn't know how to effectively use this Force Nexus. Now, Vader believed that the immense energy inside this Force Nexus would give any dark side user endless amounts of power, which would allow him to do incredible things, including maybe even resurrecting his wife Padme. After several failures, Momin and Vader's men were finally able to create a perfect amplifier for the Force Nexus's power. Unfortunately, the second the construction is finished, Vader is called outside of his fortress to fight off a horde of angry locals. Momin uses this as an opportunity to resurrect his old body and attempts to kill Vader, but is defeated. Vader then uses the dark side door he had opened and walks through it. His spirit leaves his physical body. While in this other realm, Vader begins to relive his entire life with a mysterious entity narrating it. And the first thing we see very clearly is Anakin's mother, with a very creepy looking Palpatine behind her influencing her womb, confirming that Anakin's mother had not lied to Qui-Gon Jinn when she told him,
"There was no father. I carried him, I gave birth, I raised him. I can't explain what happened."
Because Anakin was created purely from the Force by Palpatine, or at least that's what the Vision wants him to think. Now in Legends, in the Darth Plagueis novel, Darth Plagueis, the master of Darth Sidious, had figured out how to create life through the Force. He, along with Palpatine, had used this skill to create life from nothing, and while it was never directly mentioned that the life they created was Anakin, many fans had made this connection and had considered it a possible theory, and it seems like now this canon comic has confirmed that this is true. Now there are some issues with the scene though. For one, Palpatine is scarred and withered from the dark side of the Force. In reality, Palpatine should have been in his younger form when he created Anakin. This was far before his confrontation with Mace Windu. This could be just an artistic choice and not significant. Anakin continues to witness the rest of his life pass before him in the dark side realm, and he hears that mysterious voice tell him that the truths we cling to depends on your point of view. Anakin proceeds to fight and kill most of the Masters of the Jedi Order, and finally proceeds to the Jedi Temple, where strangely Palpatine and Obi-Wan Kenobi are waiting for him. The narrator whispers, "I am your father." Palpatine defeats Obi-Wan Kenobi in a duel and blocks Anakin's way, and so Anakin kills Palpatine as well. At the end of this vision, Anakin sees Padme and once again fails to save her after she can't recognize Anakin anymore, claiming that he had already died. Once the vision was over, Darth Vader wakes up and destroys the Force door and contacts Palpatine, who tells Vader that finding even one true thing is quite difficult, perhaps hinting that he knows what Vader has learned. Now let's go back to the Darth Plagueis novel.
Darth Plagueis was a dark lord of the Sith, so powerful and so wise. He could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life.
When Darth Plagueis and Sidious were able to create life in the Force, they shifted the balance of the dark and light side of the Force, which in turn made the Force itself rebel against the two. This would lead to Darth Plagueis' connection to the Force to severely weaken, and I also believe that the Force directly sabotaged their creation, Anakin Skywalker. And this is why Darth Vader ultimately dooms the Sith and turns on Emperor Palpatine. The Force always manages to find a way to balance itself out. This is just another confirmation that Disney is heading towards a new view of the Force, that balance doesn't mean just the destruction of the dark side, but allowing the dark and light side to coexist in a balanced form. Much like the ancient Jedi who practiced both sides of the Force, and in many ways were much more peaceful. I've always supported this gray view of the Force because I think it's more believable and realistic. And the Jedi's repeated failure just goes to show us how flawed of an organization they were. The Jedi were dogmatic, extreme, and hypocritical in their views of the Force, and it ultimately led to their destruction. So now that they've given Palpatine the ability to create life from the Force itself, we unlock a lot of new potential abilities. This is important because Palpatine has always been several steps ahead of everyone else. He laid down the foundation for the First Order years before Darth Vader killed him. And more importantly, being Vader's creator and father figure, it was probably very unlikely that Vader would be able to hide his resentment towards the Emperor. Palpatine most likely knew and prepared himself to be betrayed by Darth Vader. He must have had some other secret contingency plan beyond the more visible one, which was carried out by his creepy red robot servants. If Palpatine is able to create life from the Force, something that no other being has done in recent history, that means he has an incredible amount of control over the midichlorians. That was basically what his master Darth Plagueis had focused on for his entire life. When an individual died, their midichlorians would also desert the body, carrying away the essence or spirit of that individual. It's possible that the Jedi were able to maintain their Force ghost by keeping all those midichlorians together so that they just didn't dissipate. It's possible that Palpatine would have figured out this technique and practiced it. Now, prior to this, it was impossible for a Sith to create a Force ghost. The only way they could preserve their consciousness after death was by possessing an artifact, like Momin did with the mask. That's because the Sith interacted with the Force differently. The Jedi were more passive and became one with the Force, creating a mutual understanding between the Jedi and the Force, which allowed them to work together in order to preserve the essence of a being, creating a Force ghost. But the dark side tried to control the Force and bend it towards its will. Most dark side users did not have the same power that Sidious had, and they weren't really able to preserve their essence because of that. But Darth Sidious obviously was powerful enough to control the midichlorians to an extent that he was able to create life, which means he should be powerful enough to also consolidate his essence after dying by using those same midichlorians. This gives us the possibility that Darth Sidious is still alive and has survived the Battle of Endor, well, at least in spirit form. And this also does feed into the rumors that Palpatine will return in Episode 9. We actually did an entire video talking about how that could happen. Check it out here in the top right corner. So guys, that is the big reveal. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Do you believe that the comic is trying to troll us, or do you actually believe that Palpatine is the father and creator of Anakin? And if you do believe that, what do you think that will do to the future of Star Wars? Anyway guys, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button for more awesome content as usual. Thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.